So my telling of the story of these early days comes from conversations primarily with David Albert, one of the founders of NSP and our mentor in this business. The Movement for a New Society, or MNS, the genesis of New Society Publishers, was a Quaker-based activist collective that began in 1971 as a response to the Vietnam War, and most likely was the foundation of the anti-nuclear movement in the US. MNS was a collective organized to facilitate trainings in nonviolent civil disobedience, a practice that no one really knew much about then, especially in the US. Following in the footsteps of the theory and practice of Gandhi and Martin Luther King, MNS would eventually acquire several old mansions in Philadelphia, where folks would come and stay, setting up temporary communities while dedicating themselves to learning how to stand up collectively and nonviolently to the war machine in its many forms. Training materials were needed. Pamphlets were created with titles like Why Nonviolence, and were distributed in quantities of 500 or so at a time, and the whole operation was funded by donations. Over 500,000 copies of Why Nonviolence would eventually be in circulation. As David describes it, the collective was a book packing company, and out of this grew a book publishing company. Quite the reverse of most other companies, publishing companies I know of. The first book, The Resource Manual for a Living Revolution, published in 1978, was known familiarly as the Monster Manual, most likely because it contained everything anyone needed to transform society towards peace and nonviolence, and it was a one-of-a-kind publication. The newly formed book publishing collective knew nothing about book publishing and had little or no self-discipline, according to David. They did know that the best way to sell books was to publish a bunch of them. So in the early 80s, they produced 6 books, funding them on advance sales. Joanna Macy's Despair and Personal Power in the Nuclear Age, Pam McAllister's Reweaving the Web of Life, and the Barbara Deming Reader most likely carried them the first few years. Reweaving probably sold about 30,000 copies. I bought one in 1982, and it changed my life, as NSP books tend to do. There is much, much more to tell about the origins of New Society Publishers, and I'm encouraging David Albert to write the full story for us.